What are some of the
Lighting okay here?
yeah, no, it looks better than my lighting here in my room, so you're solid.
Uh, Actually,
Yeah.
you look clear, so I was like, man,
Oh, okay, good. No, yeah,
okay,
on my end you look good there too, so you're solid. What are
okay,
some of
cool.
the ways that you yourself are are trying to stay sharp at home, or are you just taking like a well-deserved break? Like, how are you approaching this? As I know you're retired from fighting, but you're still competing in jiu-jitsu. How are you yourself using your time at home from as an athlete?
I've actually it's actually been really nice. I've been really trying to put all of my knowledge into creating an instructional that is going to help, I think, jujitsu people all over the world in understanding the art. So I've been putting it together probably for the last, I don't know, maybe 6 months to 12 months, maybe 6 months to a year, of really trying to compile as much knowledge as possible uh, and trying to condense it into some concepts, some really true grappling concepts that apply across the board for all of grappling. What are trying to really identify all of the rules? What are the actual rules? What are we actually trying to do with jiu-jitsu? And how do I apply that to every single position? So I've been working hard on that. I believe I'm pretty close to um, releasing that whenever I can get to film when everything kind of calms down. And so I've been studying a lot and really doing a lot of jiu-jitsu, I guess, in my mind, and also watching a lot of jiu-jitsu to see if this is it just um, a concept, or is this a proven theory? So I've really been trying to hone in on the details, make it as precise as possible without getting complicated. So I think it's said often, by a lot of different people, but if you can't explain it simply enough, then you don't know it well enough. And I think that's what I've been trying to get to is, how can I make jujitsu as digestible as possible for people of all levels, and so it's been some nice time to really do a lot of writing in regards to that, and experimentation, and it's been fun.
Oh, that's really exciting. Knowing that you're working on an instructional series is really cool. That's yeah. I mean, I think you know it who said it, and I'm not the only one to say it. But yeah, I mean, you're one of the best minds in martial arts. You've got just an amazing amount of experience, and and as an athlete, but not every athlete can coach. Not every athlete is a deep thinker, and not every deep thinker actually has experience with it. So you got all of that. So that's going to be really cool. I mean, it's been fun seeing, watching Ryan's series. I know Ryan just put out his 50-50 stuff. So yeah, yours will be really really cool. Are you looking at it from um, any one particular angle of jiu-jitsu, like sports
Uh,
jiu-jitsu or MMA, or is it kind of overall?
it's kind of for overall. I'm basically trying to come up with, I'm going to start out with just the fundamentals of, like, basically trying to rewrite how people should approach
Mm.
jujitsu. What are the most important things? What are the things that are actually interacting with each other to make grappling work? So I'm going to start out with kind of the full gamut, starting out with all the fundamentals as far as, escapes, side control, attacking and, top and bottom, guard, top and bottom, things like that, of really kind of identifying these principles over and over from the different positions, and giving people a new way to approach the basics of jujitsu. And, you brought up Ryan Hall's name. He's been probably the most influential guy in my sphere, as far as influencing why I see this and why I kind of came to these conclusions. So Ryan has been a huge help in that regard, and has really gotten me to see jujitsu in a much deeper way. And I hope to kind of pass that on in a little bit of a different way to others, so they can see a little bit further with their jujitsu as well.
That's really cool, and I mean that's a cool. It seems like a really cool, humble relationship too, because you're talking about learning from Ryan Hall, you coach Ryan Hall, right? He goes, like he goes to you and he considers you a coach because you are. So you're both learning from each other. And I think that's super cool.
Yeah, I think that's what the martial arts is all about, and I think, early on when he contacted me, I was like, hey, listen, man, yes, I will help you, but you got to help me too. That's the deal. So, I admire his mind and I admire his martial arts prowess and what he's been able to bring to the jiu-jitsu world. And I think he's going to bring some new things and some exciting things in the mixed martial arts world as well. And I think that's the key is what can I give you without telling you exactly what to do? I think it's one thing for me to just give you all the answers and for me to be Google Maps to tell you, okay, you take a left on this street, you take a right here, you go 100 yards, then you go right. I think having you do all those things is almost too much in some ways. And also, are you really learning how to get to where you need to go? What if I gave you a compass? What if I could give you a compass? So now you don't have to rely on me to tell you to go 500 yards straight and then left and then right, go around the circle, go right. Like that's all like too many directions. And I'm actually holding your hand the whole way. Well, jiu-jitsu isn't like that. Jiu-jitsu, you're going to go into a lot of unknown territory. But if you have that compass, you know what to follow and generally what to do and figure things out. And if you make the mistakes, you go, okay, here it is. I wasn't following the compass. I got to be able to do this and that. And you can kind of help and teach yourself. Whereas if I'm just telling you where to go the whole time, you have to rely on me every single time. And I think it's not an efficient way. And hopefully, I've done that for Ryan, and Ryan has certainly done that for me. It's like, here's some tools. Use these tools to figure it out. I'm not going to tell you what to hammer. I'm not going to tell you, what screwdriver to use. You have all the tools. It's pretty much self-explanatory. Figure it out. And when you figure it out and you internalize that, I feel like it's so much more powerful that way.
That makes a lot of sense. I was thinking the last time I got to train with you when we visited Meraki in the fall, there was one thing specifically. You took me aside and you were talking about pressure in certain position, and it was you gave me an example, but you were talking about the principle. And you talked me through that, and you showed me. You didn't say here's a 20-piece, far side arm lock, or here's the one technique you need to do from here. You're talking about principles. It sounds like your instructionals are going to be very philosophy and principle based as well.
Yeah, it's definitely going to be philosophy based. It's definitely going to be scientific based as well. I really want people to understand the forces that are at play of what you need to do to make your jiu-jitsu successful, and also to be able to self-diagnose a lot of your issues that you experience. We are not trying to achieve moves. It's not I have a bunch of moves and I need to do moves against other moves. It's generally this is what's going on. This is what you need to do from these positions. Have fun. Go with it. Go. So it gives you basically my goal is to try to give you some real powerful truths and allow you to kind of play within that realm.
That's really exciting. How are you? You've got the gym, and you've got your athletes there. You've got people that are competitors or fighters. You've got people that are just love jiu-jitsu and they work quote unquote regular jobs. But going touching base again with Ryan, I'm kind of curious, and I'm going to chat with him later this week. But that's its own project. Guys who have theoretically, or not theoretically, they're going to fight, but they actually have like fights signed coming up that maybe haven't been canceled, but are they happening? And are they violating the law if they're training? Are they without blowing anyone's spot up? Like, how are you approaching that as someone who helps a guy like Ryan Hall, who coaches him? How are you guys approaching that in this weird limbo situation in terms of preparing for a fight?
I was talking to John Anik about this on the podcast yesterday, on our podcast yesterday, and it's a really confusing time. Number one, almost all the gyms in the country are closed down at this point. Yeah. But by now, if you're in a major city and you have a gym or you train at a gym, you're probably shut down. So now the question becomes, well, you don't have really a place to train. And if you're going to go in there one-on-one, like, who can you really bring in there to help you and actually train properly for a fight? Who's watching you? Who are you training with? You know, how are you going to go about cutting weight? How are you going about, you know, trying to get your 2 or 3 training sessions a day? You have to interact with certain people. You can't bring in foreign bodies. You can't travel anywhere. You can't travel out of the country right now. You can't bring guys in from out of the country. Like, you know, Ryan, you know, trains over at TriStar as well. So he's got to either go there or bring people in. That's an impossibility now. So he's now limited to just a few of his students. And that's only if they give him the okay to actually train.
Right. So,
you know, approaching the game from that standpoint, and also being in limbo as far as whether the UFC is going to go through with a fight or not, because they're telling you that they're going to go through a fight, but they also told Leon Edwards and Tyron Woodley they were going to have that fight, and that didn't happen. And they said the next 2 weeks were going to happen, but then all of a sudden that didn't happen. We're in this fluid situation where things can go completely the wrong way. I mean, this pandemic could get exponentially worse. I hope that it gets better. It seems like, for the most part, people are following these, you know, self-isolation guidelines and things put forth by the city and the national federal government, it seems. But at the end of the day, we really don't know how this is going to either progress or improve. So we don't know if those events are going to happen. I know, you know, we'd like to think and, you know, be positive and say that Tony Ferguson Habib is going to happen and all those things. We don't really know that. And that's a huge fight that the UFC really wants to put on. And, you know, we're still not sure. And Ryan's fights and all the other guys that are coming after that, I don't know. It's a really tough place to be in. When you're preparing for an event, you're preparing for a fight, and in the back of your mind, you're not exactly sure if that's going to happen, it puts you in a funny mind state as a fighter. And as a fighter, you are preparing to defend yourself against another person who's really trying to hurt you. This is a serious fight. And to be in that limbo moment mentally, I think is a dangerous place to be, because you're not fully committed as a martial artist. So, you know, that's my opinion. I'm not speaking for Ryan or anything.
Sure.
I don't know what's going to happen, but being in a situation, you know, as a fighter, when I did something, I had to make sure that all my, you know, T's are crossed and all my I's are dotted. I don't like being in that limbo state. That, to me, is worse than anything else.
Yeah, that makes sense. Makes a lot of sense. And I guess fighters deal with uncertainty. It's a precarious job in an industry, but to this extent and at this level, it may be unprecedented. And so we may not even know the psychological effect it's going to have on people yet, right? Like, it's kind of unknown in that sense.
Definitely. And it's a tricky situation for the coaches and cornermen and training partners. You know, do I go and train right now? This is not an easy decision for a lot of people.
Yeah.
I think just that alone. And then for the cornerman, what, you know, you got to fly into, you know, various airports, and you avoid certain contact. And now you're putting yourself in contact with many other people. And, you know, I think it was something like, I heard one number, and I could be off on this, but I think if we expose ourselves to 15 people, that could be the equivalent of infecting 57,000 people or something ridiculous like that. So you're like, wait a sec, what are we doing here? You know, does this make sense? So it's a tricky situation, man, for everybody involved. You know, and the UFC, who are trying to run a business and trying to put on fights right now, you know, they're in a tough spot. But, I mean, you know, I think they're going to have to come to the conclusion, like they did recently, of just kind of postponing this whole thing until things calm down. I don't know.
Yeah, no, it's a scary situation for sure. And yeah, and I think fighters are in a unique position in terms of professional athletes that we get to watch on network television or cable or pay-per-view, because they're the only ones still like doing it, right? Or theoretically doing it. The only ones that don't have salaries, doing all this stuff, right? So it's like Vince McMahon and Dana White are the only two holdouts. And it's got to be a scary situation for sure, I imagine, for them.
Yeah, and also imagine, it's one thing for the WWE guys, I guess, but like, for professional athletes, like imagine if you're, the New England Patriots and you have a game, in a couple weeks and you can't practice.
Right.
Like, or guys, we're going to practice, but you only get one or two guys. Like, you're just going to be throwing the football back and forth. And we're going to be doing mock blocking drills, and you're like, what
Right.
are we doing?
We're doing blocking kata.
Yeah, I guess, but this is just wrong. And if you're an organization and you're looking at your fighters and kind of putting them in a position to kind of lose or not be great, then I don't know, man. It seems kind of forced. So this is a tricky situation. Also, the fighters need money too. Like, I've been a fighter that really needed that paycheck, and you're at a point where, hey, man, like, I'd much rather have $50,000 in my bank account right now than zero.
Right.
I haven't fought in 6 months or a year or 3 months, whatever your schedule is, and you got bills to pay. It's such a tricky situation, man. I would not want to be in that position as a fighter or as a promoter.
Yeah, no, of course. I mean, you really, you're emphasizing, others as challenges and difficulties. Of course, as a coach of a gym, you've got challenges as well. And I know you're working on the instructional, which is exciting. You've also been putting out some really cool content on social media, instructional stuff. And I also saw a really great Instagram post as well, where you're kind of like listing out steps or philosophies or things or ways to approach stuff. Can you talk a little bit about how you've been, or the steps you've been taking to still get some instruction to your students at Meraki as well? And correct me, I might be pronouncing it wrong. Tell me how to pronounce it, because I might be fucking
No,
up.
you got
Oh yeah, okay, good. All right, good. Because everyone
people
pronounces my name wrong except for like you, so I'm sensitive to that. All right, good. So I'm pronouncing it correctly. That's because you speak Spanish. So all right, cool. Yeah. So what are some of the things you've been doing? You've been putting out great stuff. Tell people where they can find it, and like, what's been your approach? How have you guys been thinking about it? And when you put together this stuff?
So yeah, you guys can follow us at Meraki BJJ, Meraki BJJ on Instagram. And basically, we're trying to give back to our students the best that we can. We're in a tough spot where I think we were like the second academy to close down in the country, just because we felt like, hey, man, if someone's going to get this stuff, it's going to be from Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. I mean, like, it's the worst possible situation where, you're in close contact. So we said, hey, listen, we're in a big city, a lot of people interacting. Let's shut it down. Let's just be extra careful here. And during this process, we've tried to, keep our students motivated and thinking about jiu-jitsu. And if they happen to have a training partner, or if they don't, give them some drills that they can work on. Either with a loved one, a training partner that maybe they live with, or give them some solo drills to do at home, just to kind of keep them busy and keep them continuing to work on their martial arts progress. So I think it was an important thing for us to give back, because, a lot of our students, many of our students have said, hey, listen, we want to keep supporting you guys. We're going to keep our memberships open, and we're so grateful for that. We could probably sustain ourselves for a month, but 2 months, 3 months, that's a different conversation. And that's just the reality of where we're at. We pay a lot in bills, and to keep our academy up and running, it's difficult. It really is difficult being in a very, highly populated city, an expensive city like Los Angeles, where there also is a lot of competition as far as Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. So we're grateful that we have a great student base, and we have a large student base, but the reality is, I don't know how long this is going to go on. And, because our students are trying to help us out, we want to give back to them, and we want to be proactive in trying to help them with their progress during this difficult time. And I think a great way to do that is by sharing as much knowledge as possible, not only to our students, but also outside of our student base, with the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu community at large, as far as, whatever content I can provide on Instagram, as far as telling people how they can be looking at Jiu-Jitsu. When you're watching Jiu-Jitsu, are you just watching it for entertainment, or are you watching it to learn, and what are you actually gaining from it? What should we be looking at as far as what are the kind of things that we can learn and how we can get better? And so I've been trying to, tell people about journaling and note taking and, some of the little tips and tricks that I use to help me progress even when I'm not physically training. And I think, I said it before, a lot of times I think reflecting about your training is just as important as the training itself. How can I get better if I'm not thinking about what I'm doing right and wrong? And that's the beautiful thing about martial arts, which is also why I think it creates so many humble practitioners, or it should anyway, is that you have to constantly look at yourself and going, am I doing the right thing? And if I'm not, why am I struggling with it? Or how can I make it better? And you're constantly just looking at yourself over and over. You should anyway, and be like, all right, how do I make this better? How do I understand this better? How can I make this more efficient? How can I get other people to understand this better? And hopefully, people are finding benefits from that.
Is that the key, do you feel, when in terms of is that one of the keys that you've seen in terms of who becomes an elite level practitioner in any combat sport, in your experiences, in your own experience personally, and people you've been around, is there's obviously, and I'm sure there are always there's like freak athletes that kind of, they might even become a world champion. Maybe they don't hold on to it forever, but they can slip into it even if they don't do all the right things. But other than that, do you feel like doing those things alone, the studying, the extra drills, the introspection, the diet, the everything, the little things, is that what makes people great in the professional level? Because it's one of the things I've been trying to talk with my students about, some of whom are fighters, most of whom are not, and saying, listen, the things we're losing here are obvious, right? We're not rolling, we're not sparring, it's not as much fun because we're not doing the fun stuff. But training, real training that real high-level people do, involves a lot more than the fun stuff. And I promise you, if you do more film study, if you eat better, if you do more calisthenics, more movement drills than you did when you could do the fun stuff, you won't lose as much ground as you did before. Do you find that's been true?
Dude, there's no doubt about that. I think that what separates us from, the savage animal or the dangerous animal is our mind. Simple as that. As humans, we've been able to find safety for the most part, and been able to, if we want to go out and for some reason, hunt another animal or whatever, we're able to do that because we've been able to develop various technologies, and we've been able to use our mind to overcome some insane environment conditions, or defend ourselves, or be able to hunt animals that are far superior physically than us. So what separates us is our mind. And we have to utilize that the best that we can when we're thinking about things like martial arts. Okay, a lot of people out there can throw a hard punch. But how does that hard punch fit into the scheme of the rest of my weapons, or how that person moves in front of me? It's a totally different thing. Okay, cool. You have all these weapons. How do you use them? When do you use them? Why do you use them? And under what circumstances do you use them? So there's all these things that you can investigate to really look into the different situations, whether it's researching how Floyd Mayweather deals with punches, or, what is Wonder Boy doing with his footwork and kicking game to make him so successful. So being able to go out there and look and see what's working, what's not, and then taking it a step further eventually of, all right, how do we make this even better? What is Floyd Mayweather leaving on the table to potentially make him a more devastating boxer? Or how do I apply Floyd Mayweather's certain tactics or style to mixed martial arts, which is a totally different game? And, so it's a nonstop process. And I think looking for answers that are already out there, but then trying to go further than that is what our goal is, I think, as martial artists. And yes, it does. That takes training as well, but it also takes a lot of thinking about it. And a great way to do that, I think, is by watching, taking notes, journaling, and then trying it out, then going back and doing it again. I did an Instagram post on videotaping yourself as well, which is such an important tool. I mean, again, all these boxers back in the day, they didn't have the luxury of having this insane, technological marvel in the form of a phone. They had to like go into a tape room and have people get the tape from their last fight and cue it up and then sit there and then have to rewind it for like an hour to watch. It's like we have this ability in our phone. We have everything right there. We can film our training sessions. We can watch our drilling. We can have our coaches in the background coaching us through this thing. We can watch any fight essentially. If we have a few memberships or we just go on YouTube, we can watch all the fights in the past. So we have this insane library of knowledge and information that, yes, some of us are taking advantage of, but are we doing it in the right way? So I think there's so much room and so many tools that we can utilize to really get as good as possible as a martial artist right now.
That's awesome. Before I let you go, what would be, I mean, you've touched on just about everything on the positive and the negative side, but if you were to isolate it, if you could think of one, maybe it's a particular drill, maybe it's something just to keep in mind, an idea, one thing that you think is most important for martial artists, whether they're a professional fighter or a student, to keep in mind or do. And again, it could be one particular drill, it could be a value, it could be an idea. And then what's one maybe pitfall that you want to warn everyone against if they're stuck at home away from their gym?
Cool. Let's see. So I guess I'll answer the first one. I think it's pretty simple, but I think it's often overlooked. And it's something, let's say, base in all positions. So are you in the right stance at the right time? That goes, that's especially important for jiu-jitsu, but it's especially important for all aspects of martial arts. Okay, I can kick you, but am I in the position to do it? And am I balanced when I do it? Am I throwing myself off balance? Am I in a position to throw the proper kick at the proper time? So being in the right stance, being in the right base. And I guess if I was to define base, I would say having the right stability from the floor to either support weight or to move a weight or to move yourself. So, if your feet are really close together, is that an optimal place to be if someone's pushing back at you or if someone's pressuring you? Probably not. Having too wide of a base, being almost in a split. It's like, okay, you have great stability, but now you can't move very well. So, understanding where you're vulnerable to get swept, for example, where your hands need to be, where your legs need to be at the right time. What are you taking away from that individual? And what are you giving yourself in that certain position? And I think, just looking at that and understanding base and where your balance needs to be for the various positions, standing and on the floor, is super important. I think it's an overlooked thing because we can throw ourselves out of position so easily where we make that person that we're going against look like a superstar because I'm throwing myself completely out of position. It's like, okay, I got this great overhand left, but if I am completely off balance and I miss it, it probably wasn't a great risk-reward situation. So hopefully that makes sense.
Yeah, that's excellent. That's excellent. Is there any singular pitfall that you want to warn people away, whether it's a mentality or a certain food that they shouldn't be eating? Any pitfall while staying at home?
Well, it's tough, man. For me too, it's like my wife loves to cook, so she baked banana bread yesterday, and I'm like, yeah, here we go. At least it was like this fancy buckwheat banana bread. I didn't feel so guilty about, but it can be tough. She loves to bake, so I'm usually the guinea pig in that regard. But I think the key is really just trying to take care of your body at this point. What's a better motivator than not wanting to get something like coronavirus? So, like you hear these stories like, oh, it really doesn't affect young people. They should be fine. But then you hear these stories of this like young 30-year-old guy who, is at 20%, breathing capacity where every breath they take, they feel like they can't get a good breath. That's a scary thing, feeling like you're drowning.
Yeah.
So even if you're able to get out of it, I think that the panic that ensues from having something like that, not being able to breathe, of having flu-like symptoms, and, you know, just having an overall headache, and, you know, if you have kids or older ones around you, I mean, it's a tricky situation. So really trying to eat healthy as far as getting the right vitamin C, and you stay as hydrated as possible. You know, maybe take some extra vitamins as far as vitamin C's, your multivitamins. You know, I think staying hydrated, getting the right vitamins in you, getting the proper amount of sleep, just those three things alone should be something that people should be looking into. Maybe not eating so much sugar, which makes you, you know, more vulnerable to other things like viruses and bacterias and all things like that. So trying to limit the amount of sugar you take in.
Right.
Those are some things that I think should help.